Prosecutors have started their closing arguments against Diddy. They've said he engaged in kidnapping, arson, forced labor, bribery, and trafficking.
They pointed out if he did 2 of these acts, then he's guilty of racketeering.
So the defense essentially said, as you mentioned, that this is a fake trial, that the evidence that was presented before this jury does not prove the government's charges. And they also worked to undermine these witnesses, to paint them as liars.
One of the rooms, I can confirm to you that when Mark Agnifilo finished, the room erupted in cheers. Everyone in the room started cheering, loudly clapping when his closing argument was finished.
After 7 intense weeks of explosive testimony that rocked the entire entertainment industry, the future of Sean Diddy Combs now lies in the hands of 12 jurors. What happened in that Manhattan courtroom during closing arguments was beyond dramatic. It was the ultimate showdown between prosecution and defense. A fight that could decide whether one of hip-hop's most powerful moguls ends up behind bars for life or walks away a free man. The charges? Racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, and the transport of individuals for prostitution, each carrying the weight of a possible life sentence. But just when things seemed to reach their peak, a twist unfolded in court that left everyone, reporters, legal analysts, even the jury, completely shaken and split on what comes next.
His defense attorney talking to the jurors in a very folksy manner. Some people in court say that he's actually sounding a little flippant at times. And I want to give you a couple of examples of how he's trying to take this narrative of what we've heard from prosecutors about Sean Combs to a more relatable sense.
Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo made a bold and deeply controversial move that instantly defined the closing arguments. Instead of simply defending Diddy, he flipped the script entirely. In a moment that stunned even veteran courtroom reporters, Agnifilo went on the attack, crafting a drastically different image of the man the world has come to know as Diddy.
Mark Agnifilo describing the relationship between Combs and Cassie, remember that hotel video, as a modern-day love story. In fact, one of the greatest love stories of our time, and even calling Cassie Ventura the winner in all of this, pointing to the fact that she won a $30 million.
This was the moment that could make or break the entire defense. Mark Agnifilo stood before the jury and described the relationship between Diddy and his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura as one of the greatest love stories of our time. Yes, the same relationship prosecutors had spent weeks portraying as toxic, abusive, and rooted in control and trafficking. The audacity was unreal. Here was a defense lawyer watching surveillance footage of his client allegedly assaulting a woman in a hotel hallway and calling it love.
He told the jury today there was something off with the drugs he took before he violently attacked her. He's blaming it on the drugs. Bad drugs. Agnifilo said they were different. The drugs were off. The drugs were bad.
But Agnifilo wasn't finished. In what might have been the most jaw-dropping moment of his entire closing argument, he tried to explain away the now infamous hotel surveillance footage, the same clip that had already burned itself into the public's memory. According to him, Diddy wasn't being violent on purpose. He wasn't an abuser, he claimed. He was a victim, not of circumstance, but of bad drugs. The violence, Agnifilo argued, wasn't rooted in intent. It was pharmaceutical. The courtroom froze. Even the most seasoned legal analysts couldn't hide their shock. It was a bold defense, maybe even desperate, but one that instantly changed the energy in the room.
Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo came in the courtroom and tested the mics. He sang Copacabana.
Her name was Lola.
It's just a big joke.
And they're acting like he is going to get away with something here.
Thinking it was all one big party. This is a man that thinks he's going to walk away.
What happened next turned into one of the most unforgettable and controversial moments of the entire trial. Just before launching into his final arguments, defense attorney Mark Agnifilo took the courtroom microphone and sang Yes, he tested the mic by belting out the lyrics to Copacabana. Her name was Lola, his voice echoing through a room where for weeks, victims had relived their darkest trauma. The moment was surreal. This was a trial centered around devastating claims of abuse, trafficking, and manipulation. And here stood the defense lawyer performing like he was on a stage instead of in a courtroom. Reactions were swift. Critics blasted the act as tone-deaf and disrespectful. But Agnifilos's supporters saw it as a bold display of composure and control. Either way, it cemented itself as a moment no one inside that courtroom or following the case would ever forget.
Diddy looked to be in very good spirits. I saw him looking back at his children right before court started, giving them a big smile. And then during the break, when everybody was in the morning recess, people were milling about the courtroom.
Through it all, Diddy remained strikingly composed. Court reporters noted how calm and collected he appeared, smiling at his children, even seeming relaxed and at times optimistic. His family filled the courtroom gallery. His mother sat front and center. His daughters stood by him. It was a powerful image. A man facing the possibility of life behind bars, yet surrounded by those who still saw him as more than the headlines. For Diddy, these might have been his final hours of freedom, but you wouldn't have known it by looking at him.
I saw one of his twin daughters hand a piece of paper to attorney Tenny Garagos, Mark Garagos' daughter, who's one of the attorneys on the Diddy team. And she then handed that paper to Diddy, and he read whatever was on it, and then he turned back around, looked at his daughter.
In a rare and touching moment that softened the courtroom's tension, one of Diddy's daughters quietly passed a handwritten note to his legal team. When Diddy read it, his face broke into the biggest smile anyone had seen from him during the entire trial. He looked over at his daughter and gave a small fist pump, a subtle yet powerful gesture of connection between father and child. Even as he stood on the brink of a possible life sentence, that moment reminded everyone of the human being behind the headlines. But the prosecution wasn't swayed. They refused to let emotion cloud the brutal facts of the case.
Maureen Comey, who's the lead prosecutor, pointed out that these women just don't have a motivation to lie. Cassie Ventura, Sean Combs' ex-girlfriend, has already gotten $30 million, $20 million in a settlement with Sean Combs. And with Mia, a former employee of Sean Combs, they pointed out Sean Combs' team accused her of acting. And they said she really took a lot of courage to get on that stand. And just to describe what she was like, she just seemed so beaten down when she was testifying about these experiences she had, Kelly.
Lead prosecutor Morin stepped up with a closing rebuttal that pierced straight through the defense's narrative. Her delivery was sharp, measured, and devastating. She asked the jury a simple but powerful question. Why would these women lie? Cassie Ventura, she reminded them, had already received a $30 million settlement. She had no financial reason to risk everything by lying under oath in a federal courtroom. The prosecution painted the defense's version of events as not just implausible, but insulting to the victims who had bravely come forward. Kelly followed up by drawing a powerful portrait of another key witness, Mia, a former employee whose testimony left the courtroom in silence. The defense tried to dismiss her as a performer, but Kelly described a woman visibly shaken, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes fixed on the floor as she recounted years of alleged abuse. This, she argued, was not acting. It was the raw, painful truth of someone still haunted by her trauma.
Prosecutors said, there's no Oscar or Tony for acting in this courtroom, and it took a lot of courage for these women to come forward with these allegations against Sean Combs, a very powerful person.
All right, y'all. So yesterday in court, closing arguments began. So the prosecution is up first. They took the full day yesterday. Yesterday was a very long day, even though it was a shorter day. So basically what they did in their closing...
There's no Oscar or Tony being handed out in this courtroom, Cum reminded the jury, a line that echoed far beyond those four walls. It was a pointed message. Real trauma doesn't come with performances or rehearsals. On one side stood a defense team almost treating the trial like theater. On the other, prosecutors elevating the raw bravery of the alleged victims who dared to confront one of music's most untouchable figures. The ripple effects were already being felt outside the courtroom. Big Homie, Diddy's former bodyguard and a vocal figure throughout the case, revealed he had fled the U.S. indefinitely out of fear for his safety. A man once paid to protect Diddy, now worried for his own life. A powerful reminder of just how deep this scandal runs. The prosecution dedicated an entire day to carefully laying out their case, guiding the jury through months of evidence, witness accounts, and disturbing allegations. They portrayed Diddy as the center of a criminal enterprise, one that exploited his fame, money, and influence to enable a system of abuse and trafficking.
The defense also attempting to sway jurors into seeing Combs' ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, as a willing participant in his swingers lifestyle.
It was like mandatory that I had to finish each session orgasm. And it had to be specific. It has to be all around the outside of her vagina. You know what I'm saying? And what made me kind of figured something was going on with it.
But the defense painted a very different picture. Agnello confidently told the jury this trial wasn't really about the charges. It was about domestic violence, something his client wasn't even officially charged with. In a surprising admission, he said, "We own it," openly acknowledging the abuse, but insisting it didn't rise to the level of the federal crimes being alleged. The testimony revealed during the trial painted a deeply unsettling picture of control and manipulation. Witnesses shared accounts that went far beyond normal relationship dynamics, describing strict rules and behaviors that pointed to a pattern of calculated abuse, not mutual consent.
I talked to a lawyer that was very close to this case, and what he said was, this is really a domestic violence case that has just blown up into a RICO and trafficking and so forth. But at the heart of it, that's really what it is. It's really domestic violence.
And throw the arson in there, however.
There's that, yeah, with Kid Cudi.
The prosecution's strategy was clear. They didn't need to prove every incident was non-consensual. Just that one moment with each victim involved force, fraud, or coercion. That legal threshold, lower than many expected, still carried devastating implications. As the jury prepared to deliberate, the divide between both sides was sharp. The defense tried to reframe abuse as love, violence as bad drug reactions, and federal crimes as relationship drama. Meanwhile, prosecutors built their case brick by brick on victim testimony, physical evidence, and the chilling pattern of behavior they argued revealed something far darker. To some, the cheers for Diddy's lawyer were signs of a witch hunt against a successful black man. To others, this was long overdue accountability for someone who'd allegedly used his power to hurt others. Now, 12 jurors must decide not just a man's future, but what justice and influence mean in America. What unfolded over 7 weeks was more than a celebrity trial. It was a mirror, one where we saw how society often romanticizes dysfunction, confuses control with love, and excuses toxic behavior. That a defense lawyer could call Diddy and Cassie's story one of the greatest love stories of our time, while admitting to violence, shows how deeply this narrative runs. But beyond legal arguments were human moments. A daughter passing Diddy a note, sparking a rare smile. A witness crumbling mid-testimony. A former bodyguard fleeing the country in fear. These are real people, not headlines. Whether you believe the testimonies or not, the courage it took for women to come forward against such power cannot be overstated. Their voices sparked conversations about consent, fame, influence, and justice. Whatever the verdict, this trial has already changed something. It forced society to confront its blind spots and left us asking what we're truly willing to accept from those at the top.